There is a photograph that should not exist, and yet it does. 3 children standing in a field outside Brier Ridge, West Virginia, spring of 1987. They are holding hands. Their eyes are hollow. Their clothes are out of place, as if lifted from a world that no longer belongs to time. The most unsettling detail is not their expressions, nor the way they seem frozen in the moment. It is what stands behind them. The foundation of a house that was supposed to have burned to ash in 1962. A place that should have ended in fire and been forgotten by history. But history, as Brier Ridge would learn, never stays buried. On a quiet April morning, Melissa Carver was jogging along Route 42 when she saw them. 3 children at the edge of a cornfield, perfectly still, perfectly silent. She thought at first they were playing a game, but as she came closer, every instinct in her froze. Something about the way they stood, the way their eyes didn't track her movements, felt wrong in a way that even years later she struggled to describe. Not injured, not afraid, but wrong. The oldest boy appeared to be around 12. The girl beside him looked 9. The youngest, standing to her left, could not have been more than 6. Their clothes were clean, pressed, and decades out of place. Boys in high-waisted trousers and suspenders. The girl in a cotton dress with lace trim. Their faces were pale, soft, untouched by weather or hardship. Their hands were linked tightly, as if someone had posed them that way and left them. Melissa approached slowly and asked if they were lost. The oldest boy looked at her with an expression far too calm for a child in danger. Then he said 2 words that chilled her to her bones. "We came back." She ran to the nearest gas station and called the sheriff. When Sheriff Tom Decker arrived, the children had not moved an inch. They stood exactly where Melissa had left them, facing the field, hands locked. Decker, a man who had seen more violence than he cared to recount, would later admit that nothing in 23 years of service had filled him with the same unease as those 3 children. He asked their names. The oldest boy spoke first, Michael Grayson. The girl followed, Caroline Grayson. The youngest whispered, Samuel Grayson. Decker knew those names. Everyone in Brier Ridge did. Because 25 years earlier, in 1962, the Grayson home on Crescent Hill Road had burned to the ground. Richard and Evelyn Grayson died in the fire. Their 3 children had vanished. No bodies were ever recovered. The official explanation was simple. The children were lost in the collapse. Time moved on. The case faded. But here they were, standing in front of him. Children who should have been grown adults by now. Children who should have been older than he was. And yet they were the exact ages recorded in their missing person files. 12, 9, 6, not a day older. When Decker asked where their parents were, Michael looked at him with an expression that made the sheriff's breath falter. Ancient. That was the word he later used. Like a child wearing the face of someone who'd lived far too long. Our parents went into the ground a long time ago. Those words marked the moment the story of the Grayson children stopped being a mystery and became something far darker. Something the town would try to bury. Something it would fail to bury. Within 48 hours, investigators from the state and federal level flooded into Brier Ridge. Child psychologists, forensic experts, medical examiners, specialists in cases of extreme trauma. But nothing they uncovered explained what was standing in front of them. The medical exams revealed the impossible. Physically, biologically, undeniably, these were children. Children whose bodies had not aged since 1962. Fingerprints taken from a ceramic cup during the first interview matched a partial print from a toy fire truck, recovered from the ashes of the Grayson home 25 years earlier. Scars and birthmarks aligned exactly with old family photos and medical records. Every marker confirmed a truth no one was prepared to face. The Grayson children had returned. The same, unchanged, unaged, and they carried with them a story that would unravel the forgotten foundations of Brier Ridge. Over the next 6 weeks, what those children said would become one of the most disturbing cases in Appalachian history. A story that investigators couldn't explain. A story the town refused to face. A story rooted in something older than the town itself. Something beneath it. Something alive. And when the children finally began to speak, What they described was not survival. It was something else entirely. The interviews with the Grayson children began on April 21, 1987, inside a quiet room at the County Services Building. Dr. Laura Finch was the first to sit across from Michael. She had spent a career speaking with children who had endured unthinkable things, yet within minutes she sensed that whatever had happened to these three was far beyond anything she understood. They did not tremble. They did not fear. They did not cling to comforting lies or safe distortions. They spoke in soft, steady tones as if recounting events that had never frightened them at all. When Dr. Finch asked Michael what he remembered from the night of the fire, he didn't blink or tense. He simply said that their father woke them after midnight and told them the house was burning. But his voice carried no panic, no emotional imprint of trauma. It sounded almost rehearsed, as though he were remembering someone else's memory. He said their father told them to go to the safe place, the place beneath the house, the place he had shown them months earlier. He called it the old room. Caroline's recounting added details that chilled the room. She described her father lifting a section of stone in the basement wall, revealing a hidden passage descending into darkness. Narrow steps spiraling down, colder with each breath, walls damp and smelling faintly of iron. She remembered her father's face illuminated by the ember glow of the burning house above them. She said he told them not to be afraid, that this was why he had prepared them, that this was the only way to keep them safe. Samuel, the youngest, used words a child should not understand. He said going down the steps felt like moving through the earth's throat. Dr. Finch asked what that meant. Samuel looked confused that she didn't understand. He said the walls felt alive. At the bottom of the steps was a room carved entirely from stone. No tools could have shaped walls so smooth or ceilings so impossibly high for a space buried beneath a small West Virginia home. There was no furniture, no objects, nothing but darkness except for a small opening above them that allowed a single thin beam of daylight to fall into the center of the room. It was the kind of place that should have made children scream. Instead, the Grayson children waited quietly because their father told them to. He promised he would return, but he didn't. Dr. Finch asked how long they were in that stone chamber. The children didn't know. Time did not behave the way it was supposed to. They didn't sleep. They didn't hunger. They didn't feel their bodies changing. Hours, days, maybe years, all folded into one long moment. Time felt slow, Michael said, like moving through syrup. Caroline added that sometimes she felt as though she were dreaming, but she was awake. And Samuel said simply, time went away. Then the door opened, not the door they entered through. A second door, one they hadn't seen before. A door hidden in stone that shifted on its own. In the doorway stood a man, tall, dark clothing, a shape more than a person. His face looked different every time they tried to recall it, as if memory itself refused to hold it. Michael said the man did not speak with his mouth. His voice bloomed inside their thoughts. He told them their father wasn't coming back. He told them the house was gone. He told them the world above had forgotten them. And then he gave them a choice. Stay in the old room forever, in the slow, heavy sleep of the underneath, or follow him deeper. Samuel whispered that they had no choice at all. The room wanted to keep them. Its walls pulsed softly. It listened. It breathed. They were already sinking into time that was not time, into a place where being children or adults no longer mattered. They followed him. What the children described next never fit into any report neatly. Investigators attempted to categorize it as hallucination or trauma echo, but their descriptions remained precise, consistent, unwavering. They said the man guided them through a world beneath Brier Ridge. Not tunnels, not caves. Something older, something built, something alive. Caroline called it the underneath. A vast place of endless corridors that stretched farther than the eye could see. Rooms that changed shape when you looked away. Staircases that curled into nothing. Doorways carved into stone that opened into places that felt wrong, as though reality itself adjusted to accommodate them. Samuel said the walls breathed. They expanded and contracted like lungs. They throbbed like veins. And always, Beneath every step, beneath every whisper, there was a heartbeat, slow, heavy, rhythmic, as if the entire world below the earth lived inside the chest of something enormous and unseen. The man led them past others, people who looked human but were not. They stood in corners watching, their bodies bent at angles that felt impossible. Their eyes never blinked. They moved like memories of people rather than people themselves. Michael called them the kept ones. Caroline said some of them had forgotten their names. Finch asked what the man wanted with them. Michael said the man had been waiting, that the children had been chosen because their father made a trade the man honored, a trade that kept the town alive. Dr. Finch pressed him gently, asking what kind of trade a father could make that would give his children to something beneath the world. Michael did not raise his voice. He did not cry. He simply looked at her with a sadness so old it made her flinch. He traded us so the town would keep growing. That was the moment Dr. Finch stopped the interview for the first time. Her hands shook for several minutes before she could continue. Because in that quiet room, with a recorder humming softly on the table, 3 children who should have been adults spoke calmly about a secret that ran deeper than any cellar, older than any founding history, and hungrier than anything human. And they believed every word. As investigators struggled to make sense of the children's testimony, they returned to the one place that tied all their stories together, the Grayson home, or what remained of it. The foundation still lay on Crescent Hill Road, cracked and overtaken by weeds, a place the town had ignored for 25 years. But on May 2, 1987, everything changed. Forensic archaeologists, structural engineers, and state investigators arrived at dawn to examine the basement ruins. They worked quietly, brushing away layers of ash, lifting charred beams, mapping the original layout. At first, it was nothing unusual. The remains of a cellar, burned boards, crumbled stone, evidence of a fire that had devoured a family. But when they reached the northwest corner, where Michael had said the hidden room was, the tone shifted. One of the archaeologists noticed a vertical seam in the stone wall, 6 feet tall, too clean, too precise. It didn't match the surrounding masonry. It shouldn't have been there. When they pressed tools against it, the stone moved. A fraction of an inch, enough to make every person in the basement stop breathing. They pried it open. Cold air poured out. Not the cold of winter or weather, but something older, something untouched by sunlight. The odor was metallic, earthy, and carrying an under-scent of rot so faint and so ancient it made one of the engineers gag. The seam widened into a doorway. Behind it, a narrow passageway spiraled downward into blackness. A dead silence filled the excavation site. No one stepped forward. No one volunteered to enter. The first camera was lowered on a tether. The feed jittered and flickered, the signal unstable. The camera descended nearly 70 feet before static swallowed the screen. They pulled it back up and found it ice cold. They tried again with a second camera. Same result. The third attempt captured something before the feed died. A doorway carved into stone deep below the earth. And above that doorway, symbols etched into the rock. Not letters, not numbers, not anything anyone recognized. Angular shapes, curved lines, patterns that felt deliberate and impossibly old. The footage was reviewed in silence. The decision that followed came from high above the investigation team. Federal authorities ordered the passage sealed immediately. Structural instability, they said, collapse risk, hazard protocols. But those were explanations meant for paperwork, not truth. Because the truth, whispered quietly among those who had seen the footage, was far worse. No one wanted to know what lay beneath that stone doorway. While the excavation team worked, investigators dug into Richard Grayson's past. What they uncovered painted a portrait of a man unraveling in the months before the fire. He stopped attending church, stopped socializing, spent hours alone in the town's historical society studying land records, old maps, folklore, geological surveys. A librarian recalled him asking unusual questions. What stood here before the town? Who lived here before settlers arrived? What had been buried? What had been agreed to? He grew paranoid, telling his wife Evelyn that the town stood on a bad foundation. That someone had made a deal long ago, that the debt was waking. A week before the fire, Evelyn told her sister that Richard had become someone she no longer understood. He locked the children's bedroom doors at night, added extra locks to the basement door. He said something beneath the house was stirring, something hungry, something that would take more than their family if he didn't act. When investigators reviewed the original 1962 fire report, inconsistencies emerged. The fire had started in multiple places at once. Accelerant was present, and a firefighter's personal log, never included in the official file, mentioned something that froze investigators in their tracks. The basement door had been chained shut from the outside, as if someone wanted to keep something in or keep something out. The children's stories no longer sounded like delusion. They sounded like testimony. If Richard made a trade, what did he receive? What did the town gain? The answer rippled through Brier Ridge's history like a hidden thread. Within a year of the fire, the dying town began to grow. Factories opened, jobs multiplied, families moved in, prosperity bloomed. It was sudden, it was dramatic, it was inexplicable. Unless it wasn't. Unless it had been bought. The more investigators uncovered, the more they realized that Brier Ridge had two histories. The one found in public records, and the one whispered through generations. The old agreement, the debt owed, the sacrifices made to keep the heartbeat quiet. As all of this surfaced, the Grayson children remained disturbingly calm. They spoke of the man beneath the earth. They spoke of the kept ones. They spoke of corridors that shifted and rooms that pulled at them. And each time Dr. Finch asked why they were brought back, Michael gave the same heartbreaking answer. Because the town forgot what it owed. Because the trade was unfinished, and because something below was waiting for what belonged to it. What belonged to it was them. But the children insisted they hadn't returned alone. They said the underneath came with them. As the investigation deepened, the question of what to do with the Grayson children became an urgent problem. They could not be released to relatives. Their family line had ended in the fire, and no court was prepared to rule on the legal existence of children who by all logic should have been adults long ago. For the moment, they were placed in temporary foster homes while federal authorities tried to understand what they were dealing with. The foster placements did not last. Within days, reports came in from each home. The children did not sleep in any way that resembled normal rest. Foster parents would tiptoe into bedrooms at 2 or 3 in the morning to find them sitting upright in bed, eyes open, gazing at empty corners of the room. When asked what they were doing, they responded in identical tones, listening. Listening to what? The heartbeat. One mother described waking in the dead of night to find 6-year-old Samuel standing in the doorway of her bedroom, his small silhouette unmoving. When she whispered his name, he answered without emotion. It knows we left, it wants us back. She called social services at sunrise and demanded he be removed. Caseworkers questioned the children separately. Their answers did not vary. Michael said the man from the underneath had warned them. Leaving the old room had a cost. A trade unfinished demanded completion. And if they would not return willingly, the underneath would take back what belonged to it. When a caseworker asked what the man wanted them to bring, Michael hesitated, not out of fear, out of a kind of sorrow. Anyone, he said. It doesn't matter who. It just has to be fed. That sentence was underlined twice in the case notes. It triggered immediate psychological evaluation. Trauma-induced delusion was the official hypothesis. But even then, even before everything spiraled, Dr. Finch knew something far deeper was at work. Children in crisis invent monsters. But they do not invent worlds. They do not share complex hallucinations with perfect consistency while separated. And they do not speak with such resigned certainty about debts owed by towns and trades forged in darkness. Public awareness began to spread. Brier Ridge was a small place. Rumors traveled faster than official statements. People whispered in grocery stores, in barber shops, in church halls. Old stories resurfaced, things their grandparents had hinted at. Places children were told not to wander, Voices heard near the northern woods, old warnings spoken around fireplaces in the 1920s and 1930s, lines like "Don't dig too deep and the land remembers its bargains." And always, the same unease settled over the town, as if the ground itself had begun to shift beneath them. Then came the first disappearance. On June 7, 1987, Michael vanished from his monitored group home during the night. It was impossible by every measurable standard. The window was locked from inside. The door was secured with a magnetic alarm. Hallways were monitored. No one saw him leave. Yet at sunrise he was gone. A search began immediately. State police, federal agents, local volunteers, dogs, helicopters. They combed fields, forests, abandoned structures. For 3 days the town held its breath. On the morning of June 10th, a jogger found him, standing in the exact spot where Melissa Carver first discovered the children. He was motionless, eyes forward, hands at his sides, not a speck of dirt on him, not a sign of struggle. When officers approached, he did not resist. He walked with them calmly. Finch interviewed him that afternoon. The recording captures her voice trembling as she asks where he went. "Down," he answered. The door opened. He was waiting. Finch asked who. "The man. What did he want? To remind me." "Of what?" "Our time is almost up." Michael explained that he was given a choice: bring back what was owed, or all 3 children would be taken permanently. He returned to warn them. Authorities moved quickly. Caroline and Samuel were transferred to a secure facility in Charleston. Michael was placed under psychiatric observation, but even distance could not hold them. 2 weeks later, Caroline vanished from her locked room in Charleston. She was found 48 hours later in Brier Ridge, standing against the sealed concrete wall that covered the old basement entrance, tracing invisible symbols with her fingers. She told authorities she could hear it calling. She said the heartbeat was louder now, angry. Days later, Samuel disappeared from his foster placement. He was found at dawn inside the basement of an abandoned church on the northern edge of town, kneeling before a stone wall, whispering an apology. Apologizing to what? To the heartbeat, for making it wait. The decision was made to keep all 3 children together in a high-security medical facility within Brier Ridge. Dr. Finch objected with every ounce of authority she had. She insisted the town itself was part of the problem, that whatever the children spoke of lived beneath the soil, beneath the houses, beneath every road and foundation. She warned that proximity was dangerous. She was overruled. For the first time since 1962, the Grayson children were kept in one place, together, under a single roof. And that was the moment everything began to collapse. The medical facility that housed the Grayson children was built to withstand anything predictable. Locked doors, constant surveillance, reinforced floors, but nothing in its design accounted for what lived beneath Brier Ridge. At first, the disturbances were subtle. Lights flickering, temperature drops in the children's rooms so sudden that frost formed on the inside of the windows. Equipment malfunctioning without explanation. Staff reported hearing faint thumps behind the walls, like something large shifting just out of reach. Then the sounds became rhythmic, slow, heavy, a pulse moving through concrete like breath. The children changed too. They stopped speaking to staff, stopped answering questions, stopped pretending to be part of the world above. When they spoke to each other, their voices layered unnaturally, as if multiple tones were buried beneath their own. Staff described their presence as unsettling, as though the children were no longer completely children anymore, as if something else stood just behind their eyes. Michael grew restless. He paced the halls during supervised hours, whispering that the underneath was stretching upward. Caroline pressed her hands to the floor, telling nurses that the walls were thinning. And Samuel sat quietly, drawing circles with his fingers, saying the old room was opening again. They all said the same thing. The time was almost up. On August 14, 1987, at 2:30 am, every alarm in the facility triggered at once. Red lights flooded the corridors. Staff sprinted toward the children's wing, expecting an escape attempt or a malfunction. What they found was worse. Michael, Caroline, and Samuel stood in the hallway holding hands, staring at the floor beneath them. Their expressions were empty but calm. One of the nurses shouted their names. The children didn't move. Michael raised his head. It's here. The floor cracked, not from age or damage. The cracks spread in deliberate patterns, veins of dark stone cutting through tile with unnatural precision. The shapes they formed matched the symbols carved above the hidden door in the old Grayson basement. The heartbeat grew louder. A deep, resonant thrum that shook the walls, rattled the ceiling, and crawled into the bones of every person present. Staff tried to pull the children away from the widening cracks, but their bodies refused to move, held in place by something no one could see. Caroline whispered that they had to go back. Samuel said it was time to go home. Michael looked at the terrified staff members around him and said one final message. "Tell them we're sorry, tell them we tried." The lights went out. In the darkness, that heartbeat roared through the floor like the breath of something enormous waking from centuries of sleep. When emergency power flickered on after half a minute, the children were gone. The hallway floor had collapsed into a perfectly circular opening that descended into blackness. Before rescue teams could secure the area, the hole shuddered and began to close. The stone knit itself together, the fractures sealed, the symbols faded like breath on glass. Within seconds the floor was whole again. But the children were no longer there. The official report claimed they escaped through a maintenance tunnel. The investigation closed in 1989. The facility was demolished. No further action was taken. But Brier Ridge felt the shift. The town continued to prosper, just as it always had after the fire. New businesses, new families, growth that made no logical sense in a region that had been declining for decades. But with every new wave of prosperity came disappearances. Not many, never enough to draw attention beyond the county line, but enough. A teenager on a hiking trail, a child walking home from school, an elderly man who wandered into the northern woods and never returned. Always in the same area, always near where the Grayson home once stood. Dr. Laura Finch left Brier Ridge the following year and refused every interview in 2003. When she finally spoke, she said only one thing that mattered. The Grayson children told the truth. Something lived beneath that town. Something old, something patient, something fed. Construction crews in 2006 found tunnels deep beneath the northern edge of Brier Ridge. Old stone walls, carvings older than the town itself, children's clothing from different centuries. 48 hours later, the site was sealed by federal order, and every worker was paid for silence. The official record says nothing was found, but the people who live in Brier Ridge know better. They see patterns. They whisper warnings. They keep their children close when night falls. They pretend not to hear the low rhythmic thrum that sometimes drifts up through the ground on windless evenings. The Grayson children were never seen again after August 14, 1987. Their case remains unsolved. But in 2012, a hiker found a message carved into the trunk of a rotting oak deep in the northern woods. 3 names: Michael, Caroline, Samuel, and beneath them, a single sentence: "We're still down here." When police returned, the tree had been cut down. No carvings remained. The hiker left West Virginia within months. He told a friend something had been watching him. Something below the soil. Something breathing. Brier Ridge no longer speaks of the Grayson children. But on quiet nights, when the hills fall still and the earth feels too alive, some residents swear they can hear it. Faint at first, then steady. A pulse rising through the ground like a reminder of promises never broken, bargains never forgotten, and debts that always demand to be paid. The heartbeat of something ancient, something waiting, something awake.